this weekend podcast that we're not doing this week.
Jesus doesn't think you're a freak, or if he does, he thinks you're a freak in a good way.
Trust me, you two, I know what normal talk is.
You know, there's an old saying, if you can't beat them, join them. And sometimes we want to reach out for that saying when we're facing something in life that, we would like to be able to get through, but it seems like it's just not happening. Hey everyone, Adam Holtz here, your host of the Plugged In Show, focus on the family's weekly conversation about entertainment, technology, and pop culture. Thanks for joining us today. Well, we're going to be talking about the subject of screen time today, how much time we and our family spend gazing at those mesmerizing pixels on our screens. And it's a discussion we have quite a lot. We're going to jump into that theme again today as we talk about the potential merits and maybe the problems with a recent article that suggested, maybe we can just forget about screen time limits. Maybe we're thinking about this all wrong, and what we need to be thinking about is quality time, not the amount of time. So we're going to kick that idea around, probably up and down and left and right and every other direction. And before we jump in, I would encourage you to follow the Plugged In Show wherever you get your podcasts. Take a minute to leave a review for others who might be wondering just what the Plugged In Show is all about. Well, joining me for our first segment today are Emily Clark, Bob Hoos, and Jonathan McKee. Hey, everyone.
Hello, hello.
Glad to have you with me today. And, we're talking about screens, and I always like to get our conversations kick-started with a fun kind of personal question. So here's my question for you today. What's the first thing you're liable to check on your phone in the morning, and when do you do that? And I guess you'll have to decide how truthful you're going to be with this question.
Yeah.
Hopefully mostly truthful.
I could do that because I'm probably the most boring of them all. I simply check the weather because I just want to know what to wear. It's just that simple.
Wow.
That's fair.
That's great.
There we go.
I sometimes have conversations with my wife, and she'll be like, didn't you check the weather? I'm like, no. Didn't occur to me.
Well,
didn't occur to me.
And I'll chime in and join Jonathan on that ship. That ship of boringness, because that's exactly what I check too. I check the weather to see if I need an umbrella and my galoshes for the day. That sort of thing. It's completely old manville.
Right. Well, and it explains why I often get to work. I'm like, it's
Amen.
raining. Huh. That's so weird. I didn't know that was going to happen. Emily, what about you? Are you a weather person?
It is in my top 10 things that I check.
Oh, okay.
But
We have a long list from you.
Yeah, no, but if I'm being honest, it's usually not the first thing. I
Okay.
think that would be very rare for me. Usually the first thing I check is what time it is to see if I can sleep more.
Okay.
But actually, normally what happens, though, is if I am up and I'm not checking the time for whatever reason, I usually actually open up the news app and I read a couple of articles to kind of wake myself up.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I stumble down, I pet the dog, who usually runs up the stairs and then tries to get into my feet every step on the way down the stairs. And I stumble to the coffee. This is actually a bigger answer. This is my whole morning routine.
You haven't even gotten to the phone yet.
Okay.
But somewhere in there, after I get like 7 scoops of coffee spooned into the coffee maker, I'm a big news junkie. So I do a fast blast through Real Clear Politics, usually the Drudge Report, National Review, and the Federalist, just to see what's happening in the world that I need to know about today, which I like being informed. But I think it's also, it's a habit. And we're going to talk about screen time stuff today and just our habits and the way that they shape us and how they shape our kids. So that's probably as good a segue as any straight into our topic today. And, I mentioned at the outset the whole, if you can't beat them, join them. And sometimes I think our relationships with our phone can feel that way, right? A couple months ago, I came across an article on theconversation.com, and the article's title was Screen Time for Kids is an Outdated Concept. So let's ditch it and focus on quality instead. And, many of us have probably heard that, governmental agencies and, medical agencies have said, here are what the screen time limits should be. In the United States, the American Academy of Pediatrics suggests no more than 2 hours of screen time for most kids. And the younger they are, those numbers go down even further. And then, we look at the reality of what we know tweens and teens especially are doing with their phones. And the Common Sense Media Census in 2021 says that most 8 to 12-year-olds get about 6 hours a day, and most, 13 to 18-year-olds get about 8 or 9 hours a day. And I'm rounding a little bit, but
After the COVID times, especially.
exactly. And so
Yeah, they went up.
we look at those numbers, and I think as parents, it can be easy to say 2 hours a day. My kid's on 6 hours a day, and we can just say, yeah, right, And so there's this huge gap between what is recommended and what we know the average child, and frankly, the average adult too, because if anything, the research shows that adults are on their phones as much or more than tweens and teens are. And I think that we can just throw in the towel. And frankly, when I see an article title like, it's about quality time, not total time, there's a part of me that really wants to reach out for that argument and say, yeah, that sounds great because I don't have to do anything. So I want to talk about that. In this article, the author, her name is Kate Highfield, says that we spend a lot of time feeling guilty as parents because we feel like screen time is out of control.
It's very true.
But that guilt doesn't really help us make better choices. How do you respond to that observation? Emily, you just chimed in and said it's really true.
No, it is true. I mean, I have 3 sisters who have kids, and honestly, like, they all feel a little guilty about their screen time, but they're also all like, and the number one thing that I hear from the moms is, I'm exhausted. I'm just trying to survive. Like, that's what I hear from all my friends who are moms, from my sisters. Like, it's all they can do to, keep their kid from destroying the house. And because when it's like, yes, you could turn off the screens, your kid could destroy the house. That could be fine, but and some moms are okay with that. But sometimes they're just like, I just want to be able to shut my eyes for 5 seconds without having to worry about what my child is getting into. It's just where we're at. And I think it goes even deeper than that. It's, because we're like, okay, well, 40 plus years ago, I'm going to say plus because I'm like, wait, that's not far back enough. No, but I mean, like, there was a time when we didn't have this problem. We didn't have screens, So what did those moms do? Well,
coloring books. They had coloring books for their children. Yeah?
Yes, we're going to go with that. I was going to take it a darker turn. No, we're not going to do that. No, but you got to consider the fact that most of this generation who are now mothers, they grew up on screens. So you do what you know.
Right.
But it still is a relatively new phenomenon.
Right.
The sense that we've got all kinds of screens, all the place, every place we go at all the time.
Yeah.
And I think at the same time as it feels very comfortable or easy to sort of slip into that, we don't have to worry about how much time they're using on the screen. We still have to look at the potential problems that are involved there, and we've talked about them a lot. The whole aspect of screens separating us from human contact, and how screens can help us get fatter because we're just sitting around looking at screens.
I don't know what you're talking about.
And shoveling.
I'm right here.
Shoveling fast food in our mouth. But see, and there are even things like, I mean, you can even look at it from a medical perspective and talk about circadian cycles or rhythms.
Right. And those aren't small insects inside your
No,
body.
that's right.
Those are cicadas, totally different.
But you can put them in that category if you think about it that way, because it does have to do with your body.
Yeah.
And the sense that we all live in this 24-hour cycle. And if we're not exposed to light, because it's generally impacted by light sources, and if we're not exposed to light on a regular basis, then it sort of throws our systems off. It impacts. Those circadian cycles impact us physically, emotionally, mentally, and behaviorally.
Mm-hmm.
And because we go through these sets of changes within a 24-hour period. And when we throw them off, it sends everything sort of scattering in different directions.
And the screens throw them off
You
because we're
can,
getting
and-
that light at times our
Right,
bodies aren't expecting
late
to
at
get it.
night, or we can be sitting all day long in a darkened room, that sort of thing. And the next thing you know,
I often worry about you when you do that.
that's right, in those darkened rooms. And then next thing you know, it's sort of, it changes our behaviors. It changes the way we think, and it can lead to depression.
Yeah, no, you're so right, Bob, that you said a couple things. One, there's so many different things. This is so messy. It's so hard to talk about, the so many ramifications of these different screens, because like you said, I mean, there's the kid who spends 10 hours a day just sitting in front of the TV or a game system. And even if that TV or game system might not be bad for his mental health, physical health, the guy is getting obese because he never gets out and exercises, or doesn't even feel good about himself because he's not out interacting and social. So there's so many ramifications. There's ramifications of sleep. And I've been doing parent workshops for literally 3 decades. And it's interesting because I used to talk so much about entertainment and music because kind of the effect of this whole me, I want to fulfill me now, what feels right. That's even an issue. But the glaring issue right now is the decline in mental health. And I think that's where a lot of these articles are coming from, because there's kind of been this questioning in the last 5 to 8 years, because ever since 2012, ever since we've had social media in our back pocket, because that's pretty much when it all started.
Yep.
We've seen mental health take a dive. We've seen anxiety go up. We've seen depression go up. We've seen suicide, especially in teenage girls, go up. And we've talked about this on the show before, but it kind of started this debate of, well, what is this? Can we narrow it down? What is it? And in short, really, I think the report that really was kind of led by Dr. Gene Twenge and Dr. Jonathan Haidt, they kind of said, okay, what do we all agree on? And phenomenal study there that they started in 2019. They actually came to the conclusions in 2020, where all these people put their research together, and all these people that were arguing about, is our video game safe, is TV time safe, and they were arguing about every aspect of screen time out there. They said, what do we actually agree on? And they agreed on 2 things. One, there is an actual mental health crisis happening. And 2, if you really look at the data, the thing that seems to constantly, have feet to it that actually is affecting this mental health crisis is the amount of social media time. And they actually were specific. Time spent on apps where they're getting likes, followers, seeing comments. That's affecting the mental health of a generation. So when I talk with parents about screen time now, now my parent workshop, I did a parent workshop last weekend. I really focus on the social media aspect. And it's not to say that, the amount of time you watch TV or the music you listen to doesn't affect you, but the Sherman tank that's blasting away at our kids right now is social media. And I'm focusing the battle on that tank right now and saying, hey, can we watch the amount of time? And most studies are saying an hour or 2 of social media a day.
One quick thing. The fact is that I agree with Jonathan 100%. The fact is that online relationships, the interactions that we have, are totally different than real world relationships. We may think, okay, we're still connected with people, but we're connected with people in a very different way, and sometimes very unhealthy ways. And the fact is that, as I mentioned earlier, this is a new phenomenon. So this is something that hasn't been fully studied, and we won't know for years the full impact of all our screen time has on us, in truth.
Yeah.
Well,
Emily?
So I'm just going to start at kind of the beginning of where Jonathan started and work my way to the end of what he started. The video game thing that you guys kind of touched on it. So I'm somebody who has sat there for 8+ hours playing a video game and enjoyed myself while I was doing it. But I will say that when I do that if I do that every now and then, fine. But if I do that on a consistent basis, I do notice my mental health goes down, not even necessarily because I think what happens is it goes down as a direct result of my physical health going down, because when you're sitting there in that chair, for 8+ hours, you just, it's a different kind of tired when you're done. You're just like, your body like feels
Like
wrong.
you're closer
It
to
feels-
being dead.
Yeah. No, I'm not even.
And I'm
not
only
even-
half joking.
Well, no, I know. I'm not even kidding about that. Like, I do. I feel like I physically just feel gross and like, and I'm like, what is wrong? Why does my leg hurt? You know, like random things
Right.
like that.
Deep vein thrombosis. That's why.
Yeah.
Well, no. And so it's like, so like this past weekend, instead of playing video games for 8 hours, I actually went for a hike and I felt amazing after that, like physically, mentally, all of it, and it does make a difference. So it's like, I think the danger of screen time, even if it's quality screen time, because I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with how long I was playing the video games, or with the video games I was playing, I should say, but it was the amount of time I spent playing them. So it's like, you have to get up, you have to stretch your body, you have to move, because our bodies were created to move. Our bodies were not created to be sedentary. Moving along to the amount of screen time as it correlates to social media time, you got to think about it this way. Social media allows everybody to be a celebrity. Something where you have hundreds, thousands, perhaps millions of people who don't know you personally, who are now judging you and validating you through likes and comments. And when you don't get that, you've actually put yourself in a place to be treated like a celebrity. And even, we were talking about communicating with people. Yes, it's wonderful to communicate with friends who maybe you haven't seen in 10 years because they live in another country or another state or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's wonderful to connect with them, but if you're expecting let's say all of your friends on social media, and you're putting your life out there, you're not getting the same interaction that you would get from a face-to-face conversation with that friend, or even the same interaction that you would get if you were having FaceTime, like a video
Over a
chat.
screen. Yeah.
And that's actually why I think that all these experts are like, the only time you should expose kids who are 2 and under to a screen is if they are having a conversation with a real person on the
Whom
other
they know.
side.
Somebody they know and
I
recognize.
know. I'm talking about like family. They're
Yeah.
talking about if
Yes.
if you have your baby FaceTime grandma, that's great. That's a positive interaction. They are learning
Sounds like
social
a TV
cues.
show. FaceTime Grandma.
Honestly, we apply that to little babies because they're the ones who are developing their social skills, but we should apply it to ourselves as well, because the only positive social media interaction that you're getting is if it's actually being social. Commenting on someone's post isn't as social as talking to them in a video chat.
Yeah.
And
It's just not.
I totally agree with that. And I want to make an overarching observation about what all three of you have just said. What we're really talking about here, and what I think the author is trying to say, which I agree with to a point, is that it's about context. She talks about quality screen time, and her definition of quality screen time is actually sitting down, watching something with your kids, knowing what they're watching, and then having a conversation with it. I actually think I would agree with her
me
definition
too.
of quality screen time. I think the problem is that our kids get older, being able to do that consistently, especially if you have multiple kids.
Yeah, co-watching is not as
It gets
easy.
really hard. And I know when our son was born, I was very much aware of the research that said a child shouldn't even see a screen before they're 2 years old, which sounds really almost harsh, but that's right, because their brains are developing. We totally nailed it with our first kid, right? And then we had 2 more, and well, y'all should just pray for them, because I don't know that we did as good with them, right? When you bring more kids into the mix, it gets messy. But even the context of what we're talking about with screen time, are you interacting face to face with people you know, or are you interacting with strangers? Those are 2 totally different relational contexts, and we need to be asking questions about how are those things influencing us? Am I playing video games in which I'm actively engaged, which in some ways can be good? If it's an M-rated game, you might be actively engaged with really nasty stuff, even the context of the game. And so I think what it says to me is, and where I sort of agree with the author, is that there's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all answer, but I don't think that means we just throw the time element out the window and never think about it again, because I think it is really too easy to, I'm going to use another cliche, throw out the baby with the bathwater here.
We have to consider all the situation, the whole side of the coin.
Absolutely.
And honestly, the way young people feel about themselves is not the only danger. There is the danger of predators. And sadly, now in a world with social media, young people, especially since many of them are trying to get as many followers as possible, are now kind of exposing themselves to more strangers, which kind of puts them in harm's way, where a lot of strangers are now DMing them, messaging them and saying, hey, let's talk. And so there's a lot of talking with strangers, where we all remember 20 years ago when we all went to that kids' school assembly, which was like, stranger danger. Now it's like, hey, stranger is a new opportunity to meet someone. So we've got young people meeting strangers at, the Walmart parking lot at midnight, and these are conversations we need to have as well. It is a danger. It's probably the second biggest topic I talk about with parents. So it's messy. It's not as simple as here's the one thing we need to take care of. This is an ongoing conversation, dialoguing with our kids about these issues.
But again, I don't think we're in conflict with the author's article.
No.
In the sense of spending time with your kids, getting involved in the screens. If they're going to be on screens, you should be involved with them. And I think that's much healthier than just letting everybody run to their separate corners.
Right.
Absolutely.
Emily?
And I think at the end of the day, what this article is trying to say, and I think in a way what we are trying to say is do your best. Like, as we said, one size, it doesn't fit all. Every parent's going to be different. Every kid is going to be different. You just got to kind of go with the flow and figure out what works best for your kids and for your family. And it's okay to be aware of all of the articles and all the research, because that can help you make decisions as a parent. But I think at the end of the day, you do what works for your family, and you pray about it, and you talk to your kids about it, and you find a balance.
And hearkening back to what Jonathan has always said, it comes down to conversations and relationships.
Yes.
It really does. When your kids get to hit their teen years, it's a lot harder to monitor what they're doing and how they're using their screens. It's really tough.
Yep.
But if you have a relationship, if you've established a relationship through which you can converse and say and help them make their own minds up that sometimes a little bit too much is too much.
Yeah.
That can be a healthy progression. And if you don't have that relationship, which is sometimes the case,
Yeah.
Yep,
then you need to take opportunities to form that relationship.
Yeah.
I know for my kids, I've said this before, I have 3 kids, and I was able to connect with them in 3 totally different areas. With my eldest, with music; with my son, with games, video games; and with my youngest, it was actually, she invited me or asked me when she was just a little kid to help her with a play. And we walked around and walked through the lines. And that opened up this avenue where we could go out for walks whenever we needed to discuss something. So if you've got that kind of connection, you can talk about these issues, and you can talk about them openly, and I think that's a healthy way to go.
I think that's exactly right. And I think the other 2 words that get at what we're talking about here, which we often talk about on the Plugged In show, but I don't think we can repeat them too much, are intentionality and engagement. That when we're talking, when we're listening, when we're face-to-face, when we're paying attention, I think it doesn't mean we don't have to worry about screen time, but I do think it means we're building into a relationship where we know, or at least have an idea of how those screens are influencing our kids, what they're engaging with, and then we can talk about it with them. Whereas if we don't have that active, intentional relationship being built, in some ways they're just at the mercy of whatever it is that they're engaging with. And I think that's the place we don't want to be. And as we often say here again, the goal here is not perfection.
No.
But the goal is that intentional engagement and building relationship in a way that it keeps the communication doors open both ways. And I think that that takes the pressure off for me as a parent. And I don't have to worry about getting it perfect, but I do have to worry about or be paying attention to, am I really engaging intentionally with my kids in this area? So I know that we could talk about this for like the next 4 hours. I hope as we have talked today among our team, there's been things that you can really hang on to as you've listened today, and that it encourages you in your own situation, in your own family, and the particulars of your relationships with your kids. So thanks, guys.